We'll take you live overseas to the Vatican and St. Peter's Square as Pope Benedict XVI lies in state for 3 days inside St. Peter's Basilica. The Vatican says he passed away over the weekend, 95 years old, due to health issues. Italian security officials report 65,000 people from all around the world have visited to pay their respects and honor the late Pope on Monday. Patrick Novecosky is the author of 100 Ways John Paul II Changed the World. Patrick, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on. I know your book is focused on another pope, but in this case, we're talking about Pope Benedict, Pope Emeritus Benedict, and you covered him as well. You watched as he visited the United States to visit Washington, D.C. in 2008, in 2009, a trip to Jordan. Tell me about what stood out from your reporting and coverage of the late Pope.
Yeah, I was really thrilled to be part of the press coverage for the Holy Father when he visited the United States in 2008 and Jordan in 2009, as you said. I really think that we wouldn't be talking about Pope Benedict right now if it hadn't been for John Paul II. They met at the conclave that elected John Paul I and became fast friends. And John Paul recruited him, tried really hard to recruit him right away, but it wasn't until 1982 that he actually took over the spot as leader of the doctrinal part of the Catholic Church in the Vatican. They worked together kind of as a dynamic duo, I think, for 23 years. With John Paul II being a philosopher and Ratzinger Pope Benedict being the consummate theologian. They really were almost like Batman and Robin, because there are two incredibly brilliant scholars who came together with their minds that were so different but similar in many ways, and they gave us the Catechism of the Catholic Church and a lot of other issues that they covered, and a really remarkable era in Catholicism.
Could you compare and contrast the two men's personalities? Of course, when Pope Benedict served as the leader of the Catholic Church, he eventually resigned. Something very different than we saw from Pope John Paul II.
John Paul II was an actor. I mean, he was trained as an actor as a young man. He gravitated toward the stage, became a priest, and used those skills on the world stage. He really took Catholicism to the world, visiting over 100 countries over his 26 and a half years as Pope. And Pope Benedict, he was a professor. All he wanted to do was teach and write. That was his heart's desire. He actually asked John Paul II at least twice if he could resign. John Paul II said, just a little longer. And that little longer turned into Pope Benedict being our Holy Father for 8 years. Really, his legacy is unfortunately going to be remembered as his abdication in 2013 and resulting in Pope Francis. But I really hope people remember him for expanding the Latin Mass, making it easier for Anglicans to enter the Catholic Church. He drew huge crowds at World Youth Day. And as a matter of fact, the crowds in St. Peter's Square for his Wednesday audience were even larger than John Paul II's.
Wow. Definitely didn't know that. To attend St. Peter's Square and to actually have a Pope drive by you is a pretty incredible moment. I experienced that several years ago. Pope Francis was, of course, serving at the time. It's very emotional and moving to see that happen. Let me ask you, though, about what we can expect on Thursday. Again, Pope Francis will preside over the funeral mass. What are you anticipating?
Yeah, well, 1 million people came to visit John Paul II while he was lying in state. I expect similar crowds, maybe not 1 million, but huge crowds to visit Pope Benedict. I already have friends who said they're on their way to Rome for his funeral on Thursday. Really unprecedented in a sense that this is only the second papal funeral in 44 years. We've only had John Paul II. The previous one was Paul VI. So this doesn't happen very often. And it's been centuries since a pope presided over the funeral of another pope. And we're looking back at the record books, and the previous pope that abdicated, he was not buried by his predecessor. But I think we can see something similar with Pope Francis paying tribute to Pope Benedict. He said glowing things about him. And Pope Benedict really served as a mentor for Pope Francis. They met often. They showed great affection for one another. So I expect a similar type funeral as we did for John Paul II when he died in 2005.
What is it about Pope Benedict's leadership do you believe Pope Francis might take to heart and implement in his day-to-day?
Yeah, Pope Benedict was just a gentle soul. You could tell when you listen to him speak that he spoke with such love, with such passion, and with such depth of knowledge. Pope Benedict wrote a series of books on Jesus Christ, his life, the infancy narratives, all the way through to his passion and death in such great detail. His knowledge of Jesus and the theology of God was just unprecedented. So I think there's a lot there that Pope Francis can draw from. And having him as a resource for the last 8 years has been actually almost 10 years that Pope Francis has been in the chair of Peter. There's just so much that he can draw from.
Yeah, according to an aide who was with him, last words were, "Lord, I love you." How moving is that? Patrick Novecosky, thank you very much for coming on. We appreciate it. Newsmax will have complete coverage of the funeral. Thank you.